All right, football fans, welcome to a Thursday episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith, here at the Fans First Sports Network. And on Thursdays, we do our State of the Franchise show. We have covered predominantly NFC teams so far, and we're going to have another NFC team in the house today, the New York Giants. And to talk all things Giants with us from the Giant Take podcast here at FFSN is Josh Solomon. Josh, welcome to the show.
What's going on, Kevin? So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on to talk Giants. Hey, before we dive in, tell us a little bit about your origins as a Giant fan. How did you arrive as a supporter of the Big Blue?
Yeah, so I was born, grew up in New York City, now in northern Jersey, and all for my dad. He grew up on Long Island, so I kind of got the Long Island aspect with the Islanders, but big hockey fan. We got Knicks, Islanders, Giants, Yankees, but it was all Giants growing up. I mean, that was, his deal with the Big Blue Wrecking Crew back in the 80s and Bill Parcells, all that good stuff. He's taught me a little bit about the history. Obviously, I know more 2010s being just the, young age of 19, but yeah, definitely my dad started it all for me.
Yeah. So it's been handed down. Sometimes that's a blessing. Sometimes that's a curse. You've probably gotten a little bit of both. I'm assuming you were pretty young, Josh. If you're just listening right now, man, Josh is a youngin', right? Attends Syracuse University. But you were around for the Eli Manning Super Bowls, correct?
I was around. Now, I mean, as a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, the memory that I have is very vague. The watchbacks on NFL Network and throughout the years, they're more clear to me now, obviously. But yes, I was alive during the time period, not sort of the memory, but there was a time that in the wild card game against the Packers in that 2011 run. My father goes to, a little thing. My father goes to get pizza. He's picking up pizza, and Eli Manning throws this huge touchdown. I think it was right before halftime in that wild card game, and I call him, and he recalls the story. I don't remember it, but apparently I called him, and my 6-year-old little kid voice, like, Dad, Eli Manning just threw a touchdown. So even then I was locked in as a fan. I was there.
Excellent. That's a great memory, I'm sure, for your father, although he's probably pissed he picked a bad time to go get pizza. That game, if I remember correctly, was played in the absolute frigid, frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. I think that was one of Brett Favre's maybe that was Rodgers by then, but man, that was a nasty cold game. I remember watching that one.
Yep.
All right, those were the good times for the Giants. But Josh, I'm going to hit you with some harsh reality right now, and I'm sure you're aware of this. But I'll spell it out painfully, right? This is a cornerstone franchise in the league. The New York Giants have been around for 100 years. 1925, the Giants are founded. In the 50s and 60s, they produced legendary names like Sam Huff and Frank Gifford. And then you get to Parcells and Belichick and LT. In the 80s, they win a couple of Super Bowls. Then the Eli Manning run, they knock off the invincible Patriots. However, all right, there's a however. I got to pivot now, right? The last 12 years, it's been ugly, right? 9 out of those 12 seasons, out of the last 12 seasons, double-digit losses. You've got only just one playoff win. So what's happened to the Giants over the last decade or so? What's gone wrong?
Well, you mentioned Bill Parcells, you mentioned Tom Coughlin, Bill Belichick, and one kind of cornerstone surrounding those guys is the idea that offense might win games, but defense wins championships. And that's exactly what those guys instilled in that team through their pieces that they had. The debatable, for me, obviously being a biased Giants fan, best defensive player of all time with Lawrence Taylor. Then with the Coughlin era, having Justin Tuck, Jason Pierre-Paul, and guys off the line that were just able to absolutely destroy quarterbacks like Tom Brady in those 2 Super Bowls. And now I think the Giants have been trying to move sort of in that offensive landscape that the entire NFL has transcended to, but have failed at that. And that all started with the draft pick of Daniel Jones. It's just an absolute failure all around. Yes, you had that one season where the Giants make it. They beat the Vikings in that wild card game. And then you're thinking, oh, maybe there's a chance and they get blown out in the divisional. So I think that's really what's happened. And now with Brian Daboll, which I know we'll get to a little bit later, he's trying to him and Joe Shane, the Giants general manager, are kind of trying to bring that back if you've noticed recently, bringing in Brian Burns, having Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden as their linebackers, and especially drafting Abdul Carter. The Giants are kind of trying to bring back their fan base and that old mindset of like, yes, big blue wrecking crew. Yes, we're going to destroy quarterbacks. We're a defensive team. And I'm kind of interested at why, or not why, because I know why, because the offense just didn't work with Jones, but how that's going to work now in such a modern NFL offense is our only way of winning sort of idea. So, but that's why they've been bad for this past decade. I think it really just stems on Daniel Jones' poor performance as a quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a podcast maybe about a month ago on how far back it really sets your franchise when you spend a high pick on a quarterback and you miss. And it is really telling. You look at the franchises that have swung and missed high in the draft, the Giants, the Jets, the Arizona Cardinals, the Cleveland Browns. I mean, teams like that, they have really struggled to recover from that swing and miss because you don't get too many opportunities high in the draft to land your guy. I'm a Steelers fan. The Steelers have been unable to find the heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger for 4 seasons now. They swung and missed on Kenny Pickett in the first round a couple years ago. It is a significant setback. So to try to remedy that, the Giants have assembled a very interesting quarterback room, right? You now have what could be the greatest. I mean, you could make a quarterback odd couple out of Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. I don't know how good they're going to be on the field, but in press conferences, they'll be entertaining as hell. And then they've gone and drafted Jaxson Dart, which I think many people see as the future there. What do you make of the current Giants quarterback room?
Well, I first want to actually ask you, since you bring up your fandom, like, what did you think of Wilson last year? I want to start there.
Well, I think that the longer he played, the more his limitations showed. He stepped into the lineup where the Steelers had gone 4-2 the first 6 weeks with Justin Fields as their starter. And a lot of fans, including myself, were upset because we thought that Fields was improving each week. But Wilson, when he stepped into the lineup, was able to open up the offense in a way that Fields couldn't. You could just see that he was a more developed quarterback. But as teams got a better feel for what the Steelers were doing with him and began to take away what he did well, there wasn't anything beyond that. Like Russell Wilson at this point in his career, I think is a limited quarterback. So it'll be very interesting to see how far he can get the Giants.
So that's what I was like. That was perfect because that's what I was going to say with Wilson is that what you saw from his time at the Steelers, what you saw in his very interesting Broncos country let's ride era, since he's now kind of graduated from his time with the Seattle Seahawks and, you know, his greater points in his career earlier in the 2010s, is that I think that longevity just isn't there anymore. And obviously the mobile Russell Wilson that we've seen in the past just isn't there anymore. I don't even want to mention Jameis Winston in this. I mean, I know he's there as a backup, but this guy had I think it was like 13-12 touchdown to interception ratio with the Browns last year, which is, I mean, horrific. So I would say that what I think is Russell Wilson, day one starter. I think he'll be a starter for a while. And now I think it kind of just depends on the run that this team goes on, or maybe lack thereof, with how hard the schedule is this year. And then we might see Jaxson Dart towards the tail end of the season. Worst case, middle point. I think the Giants really want to hold their cards close to their chest with Jaxson Dart and wait, kind of the wait and see mindset. Like, I don't think they want him playing this year. Like, point blank, I don't think they want him playing. They just want him under under Russell Wilson, under Jameis Winston, to learn from those veterans. But I think it will be Wilson day one, and then eventually down the line, I think Dart does get some time starting towards the end of the season.
When you say to learn from those veterans, that's a good thing because both Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, while they have their flaws on the field, have earned a reputation over their careers as guys who really prepare well. Film study, work ethic, all of that is thumbs up for those guys. Wilson, I'll say one more thing about Wilson. Here was his limitation. His limitation was that his MO was first read and then check down. So he's looking at his first read And if that's taken away, he's immediately checking the ball down to a back or a tight end, an outlet receiver, et cetera. He's not getting through his progressions. And so what defenses began to do was aggressively take away the check down. And that caused him to hold the ball too long and take sacks. So whether Brian Daboll can structure a passing game that gets him out of those habits, or that can at least remedy that if it's going to be his MO, will be really interesting. But I wanted to pivot real quick about Dart and ask you this. Let's say, hypothetical, it's week 5. Jaxson Dart is in the starting lineup. Does that bode well or poorly for the way things are going for the Giants?
I would say poorly. I mean, I have to think that if that's the case, week 5, they went 0-4 and they were blowouts, and Russell Wilson had averaged a pick in each game.
Yeah.
I just, the reason that they drafted, I know they traded back into the first round to get Jaxson Dart. They have high hopes for this guy. I mean, but at the same time, the offseason was so dirty in the way that the owner, John Mara, threw Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll under the bus. Yes, it was a poor season. I completely understand that. The Giants had to get rid of Daniel Jones and literally release him. So then in the offseason, John Mara says Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they have a leash. That's 1 year. You have 1 year to make this happen. That's it. And at this point, they have no quarterback. And he wants a winning season. So they have to pivot and they have to say, okay, well, regardless of what we think is best players available in this draft, we have to pick someone. So they kind of, in a sense, had like a gun to their head that they had to draft a quarterback. So that is kind of why Jaxson Dart was picked. And I'm not saying that they don't believe in Jaxson Dart. Obviously they do, because they picked him over, Shadur, and they picked him over Milrow. So they do have some faith and belief in this guy. And it seems like Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are very brought into his talent. But I will say that I do think, regardless of that, they still don't want him playing in games this season. But I don't know. And then another thing about that too, everyone's worried about the quarterback room, obviously, because it's like 3 names that have either been predominantly starters in this league for years, or Jaxson Dart being obviously a rookie QB in the first round. I think the running back room is what is going to carry this offense. You already have a guy in Tyrone Tracy that last year surprised a lot of people with how well he ran the ball. And then the under the radar pick of Cam Scadaboo, who just barreled people over in college. I think those two guys, 1-2 punch, 50-50 splitting, who's going to run the ball this season, will carry the team. And then, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, Jaxson Dart, whoever it is, I think the passing game is going to be secondary. That's my prediction. I could be wrong. And Mike Kafka, the offensive coordinator, could be chefing up something that I don't know that involves a lot of Malik Neighbors. But you have to remember that it's like Malik Neighbors and everyone else is on the lower tier. Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. Listen, I like the upside of Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt being younger players, but I still have not seen, this is something Alex and I have talked about on our show, we still haven't seen the potential yet. Like, we've seen flashes, but we haven't seen the highs. Well, all we've seen is really the lows with the picks of Hyatt and Robinson. Slayton's been consistent of a 700 to 800 yard receiver, but
Well, that's if you're on the hot seat and you're unsure about your quarterback situation, that's a pretty good formula to have a strong run game and to build the defense. I mean, the Tracy and Scadaboo backfield duo is really a nice pairing, because Tracy's more of your slasher, not quite as big, but a guy that is a good one-cut zone back, can make some people miss. And then Scadaboo, man. I mean, Giants fans are going to love this guy. He is a bowling ball with legs, and he relishes contact. He finishes runs. He seems to get better as the game goes. So if the Giants can get to the fourth quarter with leads, or at least be in the ball game there, they've got the opportunity now with that run game to wear some teams down. And they're building the defense, like you mentioned in the beginning of the show. They spend the 3rd overall pick on Abdul Carter. They are really stocking up on that D-line. I mean, you've got Carter and Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns, and they drafted Darius Alexander. Do you think that this is an effort to, first and foremost, be able to compete more so with teams like the Eagles, the Commanders, the Cowboys, high-powered offenses? Are they building the defense to compete in the NFC East?
I think they're building the defensive line just behind Dexter Lawrence, who is that first piece there, not only to compete with the NFC East, but I think it's just to compete with the league. Because here's the thing, as I mentioned kind of in the beginning of the show, is that all these NFL teams are building more on the offensive side of the ball. And for the Giants, I think they saw kind of what they could have with Dexter Lawrence, who is non-debatable, I think, the best guy on this roster. Yeah, Malik Neighbors contending there, but he's only his rookie season. And I think what they saw from Dexter Lawrence had actually, let's take a halt on that, because Daniel Jones isn't our future. Dexter Lawrence is. We have to see what we can do there. And that's when the trade for Brian Burns happens last offseason. And then that's when the Giants also decide, okay, we're going to even beef that lineup more. We're going to bring Abdul Carter. Now we have two edge rushers from what, the Giants are hoping to do both sides, collapse that pocket. The quarterback has nowhere to scramble outside to, and we're just going to get him sitting there in the pocket because he has nowhere to go, because we have Brian Burns and Abdul Carter crashing him and Dexter Lawrence coming up the middle. So yeah, I think it's developed to help out against NFC East teams and, the mobile quarterbacks of Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts. But I just think in general, what happened was the Giants had to pivot from kind of what the normal 2025 NFL mindset is of building your team up on the offensive side. They saw what they could have potential-wise in the defense with Dexter Lawrence. So that's why they built it there instead of like a wide receiver pairing or things like that.
Well, if you think about their team history, right, when they've been the most successful, whether it was the 80s, early 90s, or the 2010s, it's been their ability to get after the quarterback that has defined their defense. And they certainly have those pieces right now. All right, let's talk about Daboll real quick. Brian Daboll. You mentioned that he's got a leash. The Giants have an unsettled quarterback situation. They play in a very tough division, and somehow they got the hardest schedule in the NFL, at least on paper. Does Brian Daboll survive the season?
No,
Ooh,
I don't
okay.
think so. Well, it's so
no,
hard.
I get you. It's a tough question.
It's so hard to say, because in what John Mara said to media after the season, which is that we need to have a winning year in order for these guys to stay. We need to win. But then you put your GM and your head coach, and it's not like he didn't know the opponents. Every team knows the opponents for the next year. They just don't know how the schedule is formatted. So he knew that the Giants were playing tough opponents. And yes, according to like Fox Sports, whatever, it is the like number one hardest strength of schedule in the entire NFL. So it's hard to say, because it depends on how Mara looks at this. If Mara looks at this in the grand scheme of things, in free agency, because the Giants did make some signings as well, not only beefing up the defensive line, but they also signed a few cornerbacks and safeties and drafting Abdul Carter. I thought they had a phenomenal draft. Obviously, none of these guys have played yet, but on paper, phenomenal draft. You were drafting players like Marcus Embo. You were drafting Alexander, as you mentioned, Scadaboo, all players which were behind where they were expected to be drafted. So if you're doing it in the grand scheme of things and the Giants only have 5 wins, then I think they should stay. Because I think that was a Joe Schoen draft that again, Alex and I were saying it was a Joe Schoen draft that we think saved his career with the Giants. But if Mara says, actually, all I care about is record, and you guys didn't, you failed what I wanted to achieve, which was a winning season, and they don't get more than whatever that is, 8-9 wins, then yeah, I guess they're out.
You would think, what did the Giants win? 3 games last year?
Yeah.
3-14. You would think, coming off a 3-14 season, if facing the schedule that they do, playing in the division they play in, they're able to win, I would say 7 games. If they get to like 7-10 and they're competitive, and most importantly, Jaxson Dart is developed well, because he's the future. And it feels like, to me anyway, you know the team better than I do, but from an outside perspective, if I'm the owner and I look at that situation and I say, we have improved on the field, and I really believe that Coach Daboll has developed Jaxson Dart so that he's ready in 2026 to take over as our franchise guy, then I'm giving him another year. I'm not allowing him to draft Jaxson Dart and then develop him for a year and then dump him and now force Jaxson Dart to start over a year from now with a new coordinator, a new
That's
system.
the same thing you did with Daniel Jones.
Yeah,
It's the exact same formula. You're looking at it. You're saying you had Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, Brian Daboll, like all these guys just circling through different coordinator each 2 years. And I'm not saying Daniel Jones is a great quarterback and this is why he failed. No, he's not a great quarterback. I didn't agree with the draft pick when they picked him out of Duke when there were other quarterbacks on the board. But it doesn't help when you're circling through all these coordinators every other year and he has to learn a new playbook. That doesn't help anyone. That doesn't help the coaching staff. That doesn't help the owner, Mara, having to circle through all these coaches, and it certainly doesn't help the quarterback. So I think it was kind of a mix of different factors. So yeah, if you fire Daboll after this rookie season for Dart, I feel like you just start the wheel all over again, and that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it's a train wreck, I get it. He goes. But if you really want Jaxson Dart to succeed and Brian Daboll shows progress, it feels like you got to bring him back. All right, I'll get you out of here on this question. I asked this to all my guests. We end the show with this. Tell me this. For the New York fan base, who is your most hated rival? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
I'm going to say this has actually changed for me.
Okay.
Last season, when Saquon Barkley decided that he was going to leave the New York Giants and sign with the Philadelphia Eagles. And now former cornerback for the New York Giants, Adoree Jackson, has done the same thing. I don't understand. There are 30 other teams in this league. Why do you have to sign with the Eagles? But they decide to do so anyway. So yeah, especially after the Saquon move, it's been the Eagles. I will say, for me, it's a little different. Because in the fan base, I have an uncle who's a Cowboys fan. Every Thanksgiving, I have to watch Thanksgiving football with him. So for the longest time, it was the Dallas Cowboys, strictly just for family reasons, because I had family ties to a Cowboys fan, and I just couldn't stand it, having to watch my team lose every Christmas, every Thanksgiving to the freaking Cowboys. But now with the Saquon move, I mean, that Eagles back on top. But it's 1-2. I mean, that thing changes here and there. And then it's always been the Commanders are like the little brother to every team. They're kind of there, and we kind of like them. The problem is, though, the thing is that we kind of like them was because they were the 2 free games in the schedule every year. You look and you're like, oh, Commanders win. And that would be the case. And the Giants they were like 8-0 against the Commanders in those seasons. But now with that turnaround for them and Daniels, that's a loss in the schedule. So it's interesting, but no bad blood towards them. Love that fan base.
Congratulations, Eagles fans. I've now talked to 4 NFC affiliates, and all 4 have named the Eagles as their most hated rival. Wow. We're going to see if the Eagles can sweep the NFC here. Hey, Josh, man, I really appreciate you coming on. That was excellent. You're doing a great job over there at the Giant Take podcast. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, that's our Thursday State of the Franchise show. Join me tomorrow, the Hot Route, with Pez from Pez's Picks. Conversations about football and life. That's become a fun Friday conversation where we get into a variety of topics, football related and other. So join us for that to kick off your weekend. Until then, for Josh Solomon, this is Kevin Smith. Have a great day, everybody.